Welcome to our Good News Wednesdays. We hope that you have enjoyed these Wednesday evenings and the conversations that I have been able to have with Reverend Dr. Steve Larson. Tonight is the third part, the third segment in our conversation, the third and last one, and it is focused on sharing the story. As we have been hearing Steve's story, tonight we talk about sharing Steve's story, which is really part and parcel to who Steve is. And we're so grateful for him sharing this remarkable story of his and the journey that he has been on, and we hope that you have enjoyed it very much. So thank you for joining us for this third segment, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
An Episcopal church gave us an 8-story building to use downtown Fort Worth. Had a gym on the top floor and a pool on the bottom floor, but the church was dying. And they said, you can use it for your programs. And I go, oh, God, we could do great programs downtown. And so we moved downtown right across the street from the Fort Worth National Bank. And because of the gym and the pool, I'd get a bus usually and go to North Fort Worth, pick up a load of kids and bring them back. They could swim, play in the gym. But then they would run around out on the street, right? So the good fathers in the bank go, we don't want you here anymore. We don't want that going on. We're going to change downtown to a great tour spot. We don't want that to happen.
Was that an element to people that they wanted there?
Yeah. And so they cut my youth funding we had another program, which I haven't mentioned, a youth program, and we had 2 other shelters that we put together also. And so what happened is they cut all my funds. And I was just in a place of being tired, and the headline of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram was Larson Quits. I just said, I've had it. I'm tired. I'm going. And Wahlberg got me set up with an interview to work in the South Bronx.
Bishop Wahlberg, right?
And so I went and interviewed in New York City for a month with my new wife, who had never lived in a ghetto. And we went all over the South Bronx. It was burning in those days, actually. And there were 8 churches, and they wanted me to build a coalition of 8 churches in the Bronx. So we went around and visited all the churches, and I thought I could really do a great job there of getting all the churches in the burbs involved down in the center of the Bronx, because they were burning. And we could not find a house in the South Bronx that would be safe. My wife would have to go to work and come home by herself. So we didn't take the call. I went and to the group in New York City, and they said, if you can't live in the South Bronx. I said, well, we found a house in the East Bronx. Right. No, can't do that. So I was really disillusioned. Talk about God. I went out and got into a taxi cab with a guy with a collar on. And we're going to the airport. And I go, what do you do? He says, I'm the assistant to the bishop of the Lutheran Church in Northern California. I go, what? And by the time we get to the airport, I'm going to Berkeley to become the pastor of Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. Because this guy...
That was called Shepherd of the Hills, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this guy sitting there in the car, what's the likelihood he would be in the taxi cab? See, there's God again, right? So I didn't really understand, what to do. And I went back, and when we got back, we decided our moms and dads were old. Her mother was quite old. Her father died. My father was already dead. But we had all these relatives in Texas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So after being at Shepherd of the Hills 5 years, 6 years, I resigned. And of course, the church by then had blossomed. And, we had many, many new members and so forth. But all my membership mostly were PhDs. Mm-hmm. Because when I didn't have anything to do, I'd go hang out on the campus. University of California, right? And I'd have so much fun talking to people there, but pretty soon those people started coming to my church. And then I got all these PhDs involved in serving the homeless in Berkeley. So we started the Berkeley Community Food and Shelter Project. And we started feeding all the homeless down in a Lutheran church basement downtown. Mm-hmm. So my ministry then became intense there. And eventually I did things like the guy teaching family therapy or family something got sick, and so I was asked to teach. So not only was I, running the parish, I was also teaching in the seminary. I got to teach family, and I had a great time there, and I had wonderful seminary professors and so forth. And it was a hard decision to move, and so we moved. And
you have family back here?
Yeah, both of us.
Both of you, yeah.
My wife has three brothers, mm-hmm. and her stepfather was sick and dying, mm-hmm. and her mother just died about a month ago. Mm-hmm. And so it was a whole new challenge. So I finished up all of the stuff I had to do to get licensed. And I got licensed, and the bishop called me, and I said, could I get a call? And he said, no, you decided you're going to be a therapist. And that was the preceding bishop here.
Okay.
And so I went, oh, that's a bunch of shit. Anyhow, what happened then is got really involved in this wonderful growing congregation, and Mike Cooper White was our assistant bishop, mm-hmm. and he got all of us involved in El Salvador because he had
when you were at Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he wanted me to know if I would go, and I said, sure, I'd love to do that. So we went to El Salvador, and I got to know Bishop Gomez, and we started hauling various sorts of medicines to the poor, because the church was the supporters of the poor in El Salvador, because the coffee companies ran everything. Right. So the people never had their own whatever, even. Mm-hmm. And so we were trying to help them quietly do that. Well, one story from there is really important. I went 4 times, and the 5th time I was called by the Interfaith Office on Accompaniment and said, Steve, we know you've been there a couple times. Would you go down, because we want to be able to figure out a way to, first of all, serve this church that was bombed by the military, and the church has a nursery with 7 or 8 dead babies, and they want a funeral. Well, the funeral was in Chalatenango on the other side of the war. So all of us got in some cars and we're driving there. I think it took like 5 hours to get to Chalatenango. And we got there, and so we wanted to go into the village and do the funeral. So out of the 20 of us, and there was 20, we were people involved from the church all over the country were there. So we went up to the front of the war, and here's all these soldiers standing there. And some of us are cleric, but many of us aren't. But I was cleric, of course. And the soldiers said, you can't go. We go, well, we just want to go do a funeral in Chalatenango. And they would go, no, we're sorry, you can't do that. And so around the corner, and behind the soldiers comes a Mercedes truck. And on the truck are women and children. And they're singing. And they parked their truck. And the woman who led them was an old woman named Deodora. And she introduces herself to me. And then she looks at me and she said, well, we're going now. And I'm going, where are we going? And she said, well, just get ready. And so she said, now go. And 3 of us decided we would put our life on the line if it came to that. So I'm one of the 3 people. We're walking forward. Every time I get to a bayoneted soldier, a little boy is standing up with his hands in the air in front of the bayonet. And that happened 4 or 5 times, but the 3 of us ended up on the other side of the soldiers. Wow. And that was because, I figured out later, a lot of the soldiers were relatives of the children. Nobody's going to kill us. Yeah. So we got through that, and then the UN Jeep comes out and said, get in. And so the UN took us down to Chalatenango, and I did the funeral. We gathered maybe 3,000-4,000 people together. I did the funeral in this bombed out nursery. And there were 2 or 3 other pastors there too, but we did the funeral, and then we all decided we were going to go and do the sacrament. And I tell you, I've never done the sacrament like that.
Yeah, I'm sure not.
Oh, my God. Yeah. And it was marvelous and wonderful. And while we were doing it, a helicopter came over, and the guy in the helicopter's pointing his submachine gun at us all, but never used it, thank God. And so I did the funeral, which was really hard to do. And then we had a big bonfire in the center of this place, and they cooked all kinds of food. And we sang, and then we celebrated the sacrament. And pretty soon, the bishop who brought us there shows up from nowhere. He says, you're free to go. We thought we were all going to die because of the helicopters. And he said, you're free to go. There's not a soldier within 20 miles of us right now. We have made so many calls in the United States that El Salvador is afraid not to let us go. The leader of El Salvador. And so in that, the only one last thing that had happened is I was messing around in the house where we did the funeral, and I found a piece of shrapnel, and the shrapnel had on it not Louisiana, but Mississippi, made in Mississippi. And that was proof that the Americans had bombed the little, and it was right on the edge, right? America was deciding whether to continue in El Salvador. So on that basis, we were able to, free them.
That funeral and the sacrament, that must have just been one of those kind of moments that you just felt the presence of God in like no other.
We could have flown. You feel like you could fly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was so incredible. And then they took us out, and that was the last time I went there. There are many other stories there as well, but.
And then you moved and then soon after you moved to Austin then?
Yeah. El Salvador and Nicaragua. I went back to Augsburg for 2 weeks one time, took a course, and the course took me to El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras. And we did many things and learned many things, and that's all I can say. I have lots of friends in Nicaragua. I have people I can remember in El Salvador that got really close too. And it was just a great time. So, let's see. Oh, okay, I forgot to say one thing, and that is, I did say it. I volunteered for some time in San Quentin. It gave me a lot of experience. Because we decided to move back to Austin. We got here, and I started a practice from scratch, finished my LMFT training, got involved with PLT, or with LSTC to get my doctorate. That's a whole long story as well, what I had to do to get my doctorate. And I'm not even sure it helped me with anything, but I learned a lot because I spent the whole summer in the Amazon River. I was doing therapy with a couple that couldn't pay me, and I said, well, tell me about your family. And they said, well, my brother runs this big corporation up the Amazon River, and they're producing the finest pulpwood in the world. And I had to have a program for my doctor's degree that was in another culture where I couldn't speak the language. That was one of the 3 things I had to do to get my doctorate. So just out of the blue, I got a car rental and drove to Florida. And this was after, by the way, I didn't tell you, in New York City, I had also gotten to know a couple there.
Florida, you flew to the Amazon?
So, Florida, what I wanted to tell you was in New York City, I had the bishop and I became friends because he was my roommate, and we were doing a program in the Queens, and they were teaching me how to organize. I was an organizer also. That's a whole nother bunch of stories. We're flying to Belém, which is the mouth of the Amazon, and I'm sitting next to this couple, and they're bitching about the fact that they just got married, but they had to go talk to this bishop, and they didn't really want to have to do that. So I'm sitting there, and I look up, and coming down the aisle is the bishop.
Oh, gosh.
So I introduced the bishop to them, and they just got done talking about it. That's got to be God, too. Yeah. And so they helped me get through security, and they helped me do all that. And then they gave me a place to stay overnight, because the next morning I took a plane up the Amazon, 600 miles, where I joined that corporation. And that was a marvelous, wonderful time. I traveled the river with a priest in a canoe. And we'd get to a village, and all the people who did this drug the night before, and they'd all go to sleep and party and so forth. And they'd get up the next morning and celebrate the Mass. See? And I was there with him, and I was co-celebrating, and with him, and he said, now there's this big basket on the altar, don't mess with that. And I go, okay. So we're doing the sacrament, and we get to the second part of the sacrament, and they start playing some music, and a python comes up out of the basket.
Oh, wow.
And that was part of their Christianity.
Yeah.
Was the python.
So it's a blend of sort of tribal religion and Catholicism.
It was called Macuba.
Macumba.
Yeah. And so, I really got to know them quite well, and I got to know the whole place was run by about 2,000 immigrants. And they had this big pulpwood factory, and they were planting trees and cutting down trees. My title of my doctoral paper was Multinational Responsibility in a Third World Nation. That's the title of my theme that I wrote for the seminary. And so one night, and I got really close to people. I got close to a young woman, and we'd meet, and she would bring her Berlitz, I'd bring mine, and we'd have a paragraph conversation over a course of 2 hours and dinner. And so one night she says, it's Saturday night, all of the natives will be partying all night if you want to come. And I go, ooh, that sounds interesting. So we go to this little village, and they're, of course, drinking and partying and playing some great music. And the one guy comes who's bilingual, and he says, you want to know what the music's saying? I go, yeah. And he whispers it in my ear over and over. And what he was whispering, I didn't know was the fact that the natives were fixing to coup the corporation. And this guy told me that in a song. He gave me the words of the song, and now I knew they were about to coup the corporation. And so I went back to my little hut, and I was sleeping about noon, and I get a knock on the door, and there's my friend standing there, and he's saying, you gotta leave. I did a bad thing. I shouldn't have told you that. Your life isn't worth anything now because they know you know, and they know you're on the other side. So I had to pack up everything, walk down to the river, and hitchhike a boat. Yeah. And brought me, I was on the boat 3 days going back to the mouth of the river before my air flight took me home.
All your work in marriage and family therapy, you've seen it all, and so
yeah.
It prepared you for whatever conflicts may have arisen in people's lives, and how to deal with conflict and all of that. So can you just kind of
so Fort Worth, Austin.
Yeah.
I started practice. I'm very involved here with Steve and Beth Marie.
Right.
And I started a brand new program in the state jail. Well, first I got involved in FCI Bastrop, and I went out there and I became a volunteer therapist with the Medellin cartel. And the psychologist out there became one of my best friends. She still is. She lives in Bastrop still. So for 4 years, I did therapy with the Medellin, and I had a Spanish interpreter. And I got really close to all these Colombians while I'm doing a private practice, see? And then we moved from there and started a whole new therapy program in the state jail. Ronnie Earl, who used to be our district attorney, was a very close friend, and he helped me set that whole thing up. And then he came out in our graduations, and he would be the speaker for graduation. And then we would cook a big meal outside on a cooker like you got. And all the parents would come in and they'd have black robes and hats. And we'd do a whole thing like that. We did 8 men every 8 weeks for 4 years. And it was a great program also. And then we moved to the county jail as well for a little while. But when I got the people involved here, there was the biggest thing that happened is Christmas came, and I was talking to somebody about how, it's really tough to be in prison when it's Christmas. Mm-hmm. Beth Marie kind of organized that thing. But anyhow, I think maybe 20 people came out and cooked a meal and served the dinner to the inmates. They had to go through 3 steel doors to get there. And Beth Marie was just really good with that. It wouldn't have been her, we never would have gotten going here. Yeah. I've been to Houston a couple of times to see her, and she's just a marvelous, marvelous person. Yeah. So I did a lot of therapy because we didn't have any money for me to retire. So I was seeing sometimes 6, 7 clients a day. And doing the state jail job and the county jail job. And from there, it kind of bumps to looking for something to do after I get diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. Ooh, my whole life changed at that moment. I didn't know what it was, of course, but they discovered it, and I had to go through, all the ordeals. I did chemo and radiation, and what happened then? It's 6 years ago now, and it was stage 4, and it was very serious, and so I did chemo and radiation. I also did my own form of treatment, because everyone I don't know if you should put this in there or not, but ever since the streets of Fort Worth, I was pretty familiar with marijuana. Of course, all the kids had it and so forth. And so I worked pretty hard at getting kids out of getting busted for pot for 25 years. There was one kid, 17 years old, got 25 years. And did a lot of other things here, but mostly those were the main programs. And then, of course, I spent 2 years at Prince of Peace trying to get that organized, which never really happened. And then we moved to Parker Lane, and it got kicked in the butt there, too.
Yeah, those locations did not work out at all for ministry.
But they were perfect.
Yeah, a great location. And it's unfortunate that there wasn't a way to be able to use those churches to be able to do the kind of ministry
Yeah.
that was envisioned.
That needed to
That
happen.
needed to happen. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And of course, I knew a lot of cops, so they were happy that we were coming in there.
So if I was to kind of put a wrap on this, Steve, I would almost call this the adventures of Steve Larson, and how God is in a taxi, a train, an airplane, in a house, in our house, and all kinds of different places. But
Yep.
but you've certainly been a witness to the work of the Holy Spirit through your life, and starting from the time when you were just a little guy to where you're at now. And I know that you are a dreamer, that you always know what needs to be done, and you feel energized to do what you can do. And so I have always appreciated that about you, and have always appreciated the inspiration of your life and the inspiration of who you are. So, thank you for joining us tonight, and we would love to have you join us next week, 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening, as Pastor Lauren and myself will be talking about the Reformation and the spirit of the Reformation, and what it meant then, back 500 plus years ago, and what it means for us today. We hope that you can join us for that. Thank you.